Look at it. Really look at it. The skull appears everywhere in human culture, carved into temple walls, tattooed on skin, printed on clothing, raised on flags. We wear it, we worship it, we fear it, we're drawn to it with an obsession that spans continents and centuries. But here's the paradox. This is the image of our own end, the face waiting beneath every face. So why can't we look away? Because the skull is the face of truth. What remains when all masks fall? When beauty fades, when power crumbles, when every illusion we've wrapped ourselves in dissolves, this is what's left. The essence beneath the performance. And somehow, staring into these empty sockets, humanity has found not just terror, but meaning. If you're ready to awaken the meaning behind the myths, subscribe. This is Beyond Mythology. From the butter lamps of Tibetan monasteries to the sugar-decorated altars of Mexican homes, from medieval crypts to modern art galleries, the skull speaks a language older than words. It's democracy carved in bone. King and peasant, conqueror and conquered, all wear the same face in the end. No crown survives the grave. No title outlasts decomposition. The Romans had a phrase for this: Memento Mori. Remember you must die, not as a curse, as a key. Because when you truly remember death, when you stop running from this image and start seeing through it, something shifts. Life doesn't become darker, it becomes more real, more vivid, more urgent and more precious. The skull isn't just a symbol of mortality, it's humanity's most honest mirror. This relationship is ancient, older than civilization itself. 9,000 years ago in Jericho, people plastered skulls with clay and painted them to resemble living faces. They kept them in their homes, not as decorations, as presences. The dead remained among the living, speaking across the threshold. In Çatalhöyük, one of humanity's first cities, skulls were buried beneath sleeping platforms. You literally rested your head above the heads of ancestors. The Celts believed the skull housed the soul. The Yoruba venerated bones as conduits to the spirit world. From Africa to Europe, Asia to the Americas, the pattern repeats. The skull is not merely death. It's a doorway, a portal between what is visible and what is hidden, between the living world and whatever lies beyond. Our ancestors understood something we've forgotten. To honor the skull is to honor the threshold, the space where one world ends and another begins, and every threshold is a place of power. Stand in the myths long enough, and you'll see the same image repeated across every culture. The skull as guardian, as oracle, as vessel of transformation. In Egypt, Osiris, god of death and resurrection, was dismembered and reconstituted. His bones became sacred, proof that what dies can be reborn. The skull wasn't just a remnant of life, it was the seed of immortality. The Egyptians preserved the body because they understood. The bones remember. They hold the pattern of what was and what can be again. In the frozen north, Odin sacrificed everything for wisdom. He hung himself from the world tree, pierced by his own spear, and surrendered his eye for a drink from Mimir's well. But even this wasn't enough. When Mimir was beheaded, Odin preserved the skull and consulted it for counsel. A severed head speaking eternal truths. The skull as oracle, holding knowledge that survives even death. These aren't isolated stories, they're echoes of something deeper. The Aztecs placed Mictlantecutli, lord of the underworld, on a throne of skulls, each one a soul that had crossed over and been transformed. In India, Kali wears a garland of heads, dancing the cosmic rhythm of creation and destruction, time devouring all things and giving birth to all things. In Greece, Hades ruled a realm where every mortal soul eventually arrived, and the fates themselves, cutting the thread of life with cold precision, reminded humanity that death is not random. It is woven into existence. The pattern is universal. The skull guards the passage. It marks the boundary where life turns into mystery, and at every boundary there is transformation. But the skull is more than a symbol of crossing. It's a container. In Tibetan Buddhism, monks drink from kapalas, skull cups, during ritual ceremonies. not as morbid theater, but as sacred geometry. The skull literally holds the universe. Brain, consciousness, thought, dream, vision. Everything you've ever experienced happened inside this bone cathedral. The Tantrics understood. The skull is where the infinite meets the finite, where the eternal encounters the mortal. It's the vessel that contained your entire world, and when that world ends, the vessel remains. Alchemists called it caput mortuum, death's head, the blackened residue left after all transformation, the stage where matter breaks down completely before it can be reborn as something purer. The skull is the reminder that everything must pass through darkness before it can become light. But here's where it gets strange, where it gets beautiful. Not every culture treats the skull with somber reverence. Some laugh in its face. In Mexico, calaveras grin from bakery windows during Dia de los Muertos. Death dressed as a bride, a musician, a dancer. Skeletons drinking tequila and playing guitars. The dead aren't feared, they're celebrated, mocked even, because humor in the face of death is its own kind of power. Santa Muerte, the folk saint wrapped in robes and holding a scythe, is prayed to by millions, not as a figure of terror, but as a protector, a liberator, the one who comes for everyone equally and therefore judges no one. In medieval Europe, the Danse Macabre showed skeletons leading kings and beggars alike in a final dance. Death as the great leveler, the ultimate comedian, reminding the powerful that their power is temporary and the powerless that their suffering is too. To laugh at death, to dance with it, to mock it, this isn't denial. It's the deepest form of acceptance. It's consciousness transcending fear itself. When you can smile at the skull, you've stopped running. The Renaissance understood this. Walk through any museum and you'll find them. Vanitas paintings, lavish tables covered with jewels, flowers, musical instruments, wine. And in the corner, half hidden in shadow, a skull. A whisper in the middle of the feast. This too shall pass. But the painters weren't trying to ruin the party. They were trying to make it real. The Stoics practiced this consciously. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, meditated on death daily, not to become depressed, but to become awake, to strip away the trivial and see what actually matters. Medieval monks kept skulls in their cells. Scholars placed them on their desks, not as decoration, as companions, as teachers. Because here's the secret they all discovered. Remembering death doesn't make life darker. It makes life vivid, immediate, precious. When you know your time is limited, you stop wasting it. You stop pretending. You stop living someone else's script. The skull strips away everything false and shows you what's essential. Carl Jung talked about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we refuse to see, the aspects we deny, repress, bury. And what's the ultimate shadow? Death itself. We live as though we're permanent. We plan as though there's infinite time. We avoid the subject, change the conversation, distract ourselves with noise. But the skull won't let us hide. It sits in the psyche like a stone in a river, unchanging while everything flows past. And until we face it, truly face it, we're only living half a life built on avoidance. The skull is the temple of rebirth, the place where the ego dies and something deeper is revealed. Not the roles you play, not the image you project, but what you are beneath all of that. This is why pirates flew the skull and crossbones. Not just to terrorize, but to proclaim, we have already faced what you fear. We live outside your society because your society lives in denial. We've stared into the void and found freedom there. Rebels, mystics, outlaws, they adopt the skull not as nihilism but as honesty, as liberation from the lies civilization tells itself. When you integrate the shadow, when you stop running from death, you become whole. The alchemists had a name for this, nigredo, the blackening, the stage where everything decomposes. It's the dark night of the soul, the phase where your old self dissolves, where certainty crumbles, where everything you thought you knew falls apart, and it feels like death. Because it is death, the death of illusion. But the alchemists knew, you can't make gold without burning away the impurities. You can't reach illumination without passing through darkness. Decomposition isn't the end of the process, it's the necessary middle. This is why the skull appears in every initiatory tradition. From the mysteries of Eleusis to Tibetan death meditation, from Christian mysticism to shamanic journeys, the skull is the doorway you must pass through. And at the crown of the skull, at the very apex, light emerges. The legends of crystal skulls, ancient vessels of wisdom, glowing with inner radiance, echo this deeper truth. The skull is the temple where consciousness resides, where the mortal vessel holds immortal awareness. From death always comes rebirth. So why now? Why has the skull exploded across modern culture? Walk through any city and you'll see it. On t-shirts and leather jackets, tattooed on arms and necks, printed on skateboards, glowing on screens. From heavy metal album covers to high-fashion runways, from Gothic cathedrals to digital avatars. We've taken the oldest symbol and made it new again. But this isn't just aesthetic. It's not empty rebellion or hollow style. It's the unconscious crying out for depth, for truth, for something real in a world drowning in surfaces. Rock music adopted the skull as a declaration. This is real, this is raw, this isn't polished. Gothic culture embraced it as beauty in darkness. Tattoo culture inscribed it as personal mythology. We're reclaiming the symbol because we're starving for what it represents: authenticity, mortality. The raw fact of being alive in a finite body, in an age of filters and facades, of carefully curated digital lives, of endless distraction and denial. The skull cuts through all of it. It says, this is what's true, everything else is theater. Here's what the skull reveals when you look long enough. We are mortal beings with eternal consciousness, finite creatures capable of infinite thought, bodies that decay and minds that reach for the stars. The paradox is built into us. Every wisdom tradition has used the skull to point at this mystery, not to solve it, to illuminate it. The skull doesn't celebrate death. It celebrates being fully alive, fully present, fully aware that this moment, right now, is all we ever truly have. So ask yourself, what does your relationship with this symbol reveal? Does it frighten you? Then perhaps you're still running. Does it fascinate you? Then perhaps you're ready to stop. Does it feel like truth? Then perhaps you've already begun the journey. The skull smiles not to mock us, but to remind us that what we are is not confined by death. The bones return to earth, the body dissolves, but something remains, something that was never born and therefore cannot die. The awareness that looked out through these sockets, that dreamed and loved and wondered, where does it go? The skull doesn't answer. It points. It says, you're here now. This is your time. This is your life. Don't waste it on fear. Don't waste it on pretense. Don't waste it living someone else's truth. The skull's final teaching is simple. Impermanence gives life meaning. Because if everything lasted forever, nothing would matter. Because time is limited, every moment is sacred. Every choice is weighted. Every breath is a gift. Memento Mori. Remember, you must die, not as a threat, as an awakening.